All right, welcome everyone. Today we're going to be going over the library management application. So in this assignment, we're going to create a RESTful API using Django REST Framework and PostgreSQL for managing a library. The API will handle books, clients, with clients being token authenticated users. Additionally, clients will have the ability to rent or return books. You will also receive a JSON fixture with 9 book objects or of 3 different genres. Okay, awesome. So here's our 9 book objects. It looks like we have some 3 different genres. Awesome. Um, we have, it looks like it gives you a project, a table of contents. It goes over how to set up our project in case you need some help with setting up the project. Additionally, I went ahead and I shared all of the cheat sheets that we have for Django. So just in case you need a reminder that these exist or you completely forgot these exist, there's a entire markdown file regarding associations, everything regarding ORM queries, serializers. There's a setup portion, and then even how tests work. So just in case you need to take a look at different little sheets as to how everything works. All right, let's say I wanted to get a reminder on serializers. I could come down and it goes through the whole process of how serializers work, including in relationships. Um, Here we go for associations. If I would need a refresher regarding relationships, etc. So all of my cheat sheets are here just in case I need it to be able to complete this assignment. All right. So I continue going down. We have a create a new Django project. Fantastic. It looks like I'm going to be running with 3 different apps, the library, client, and book. And I'm actually going to be creating an extra app here called a rental app just because um, yeah, I'm just gonna create a rental app. I don't necessarily want there to be um two models or 2 different types of API views inside of one specific application. So just to keep everything isolated, I'll keep it within its own independent app. Go ahead, Alex.
Will the assessment have us building our own apps, or will it sort of tell us what apps are necessary to pass tests?
When it comes to your assessments are going to actually come in with an entire Django project already built inside of it, and you're just essentially going to fill in all of the logic to include URL patterns, API views, and then the bodies of every model. Does that answer your question, Alex?
Sure does. Sound good. Thank you.
Of course. All right, so here it goes over a couple of installments that we may have. It tells me how to get REST framework authenticated. And then it goes over my 3 models. So it looks like I have my book, my client, and rental. So I'm gonna go ahead and simplify my life by making sure that that is included here. And let me see. Oh, that ain't it. All right, looks like we have canvas placing. All right, they changed their interface, which that's okay. All right, we have books, we have clients, and we also have rentals that are available. Now, I did get told that I was going to receive a JSON file holding some information regarding my books. So I'm going to just take a look at this JSON file. And here I can see that there's already a couple of fields that I need to account for. Right, this might be important for us in case in the assessment we get fixtures and we need our models to match said fixtures. You may want to take a look at your fixture data and ensure that the model is matching that fixture data. All right, so here I'm going to go ahead and do my title, which I know is going to be of a character type. Um, oh, we're going to need an ISBN, which I can see it's coming back as a string, so it should be a character type as well. I have genre, which is a character type. And then I have a published date.
And don't forget author.
Did I miss author? Thank you. Which that will be a date time field. And let's do author. which author is also a character type. So many different characters. That is okay. I'm going to move that up to the appropriate location. Now, a little bit of a regex, or I guess I could add validators here. I didn't see a request for validation inside of the Slack channel, so I'm not going to put too much emphasis on it. But ideally, we would want to put some validation, making sure that this genre is always one of these three types, right? Which is science fiction, fantasy, or mystery. Excuse me. We want to make sure that book title and author are in title formats. And for author, you may even want to put like a regex that ensures that it's actually inputted as a name and that there's no more than maybe four attributes, or excuse me, four separate strings being accepted. So just things to consider when you're creating this. All right, so that pretty much sums things up in regards to my book. I'm going to continue reading this portion. It talks about serializers. So there's a couple of serializers that I may have to interact with. And it gives me a couple of HTTP actions. Now, when it comes to HTTP actions, what I like to do is I actually like to put them inside of TL draw. And I try to make this gold to try to simulate a post-it note. I know it's a little old school, but it's the way my brain works. So be it. Right. And here I can see there's a couple of URL patterns that are being dictated to me. We have, first of all, I'm going to put URL and HTTP, where we have the URL of API/books. Notice how there's no V1 or anything like that, so I need to make sure that responds correctly. This is only going to accept a GET request, and it should return a list of objects. So I could do something like this, where every object is representing a book. I have where there's get API v1 books, so I can come up here. Where I can also accept an integer ID. I know that's how Django parameters work. So I can go ahead and add that. And this should return one object, where that one object represents a book, where primary key is equal to the ID. Right, when it comes to clients, we have our sign up. So everything that we pretty much covered within our cohort. So let's go into clients. This should only accept a GET request. And it should return a dictionary representing the user, and ideally their token as well. There's a couple of ways I could go about that, and we'll see that here shortly. Now there's API/clients/signup, where signup accepts a post request and should return same thing as above, which is the user and token within an object. But I also want to specify that within the body, there's certain things that I'm going to need, right? So the body, I'm going to need something like username. I may need something like email, depending on how I structure my client. I could make it super simple and just make it where these are the only two things that I need. I could make it a little bit more complicated to include first name and last name. But I think this will do the trick when it comes to my sign up portion. Right, we're just going to keep things nice and simple. All right, we have our login, which is actually going to look almost exactly the same. Right, our body should have username, email, and password as well. It should only accept a post request. And then we have our logout. where our logout is also a post request. We could have this return a response if we wanted to. In my case, I will have it return a response just because I want to see something. So I'm going to have something like where it's going to return a string of user logged out. And it shouldn't take anything within the body of the request. Right, so there's what I have currently for my APIs. If I continue moving down, or my URL endpoints, if I continue moving down, I can see there's something regarding rentals. And rentals seems to be a complete CRUD component that exceeds just GET request. Books is only GET request. As you can see, all we're allowing for is reading capabilities. But this is where CRUD comes into play. So we have API slash rentals. API slash rentals takes in a GET request. And for a GET request, it should return a list of objects where each object represents a rental. It also takes in a post request. And for a post request, it should return a single object of a rental. And it may include a status of 201 because we're creating something. Now, in the body of this request for a rental, well, now this is where I have to start thinking about the functionality, right? How is it that this is going to work? And let's finish reading the instructions before I continue working through this endpoints, just so that I fully understand the picture. So it says, set up a new Django project, the necessary apps, configure your PostgreSQL database, create models, load the provided JSON data, implement serialization for books, create views for books, clients, and rental models, and add a token authentication. All right. Set up URL patterns to connect to the views, implement appropriate view functions for each endpoint, handling get, post, and delete, and then test your API using Postman or API testing tools. Okay, so it looks like the actual functionality of how rentals is going to work is completely up to me. In this case, I'm going to visit my database here. And I already, oh, get back here. I already discussed that my client would have an email, would have a username, and would have a password, all of which are going to be character fields. So there's my client that's been created. And then my rental, the easiest way that I think this would work would be where my rental connects as a connecting table between a book and a client. And it doesn't seem like there's any sort of limitation to a book or like I have to worry about a quantity of how many books are being rented, or if a book has already been rented, that's not part of the specs of this assignment. So with that said, I would just add, hey, a rental belongs to a book and it belongs to a client, where we have a many-to-one connection between book and rental, and a many-to-one connection between client and rental. So there's my database schema. So what does that tell me in regards to the body of the rental? Well, that means that in the body of the rental, I expect to receive an integer ID for the book and an integer ID for the client. So in this post request, I want an integer ID or a client, which should be an integer. And I expect to see a book, which should be an integer. And likely, oh, we already have that status of 201. And this is for the body. Awesome. Let's see here. We have a rental for post request, or excuse me, rentals, which is get post, create a new rental for a client or rent out a book, expect a return, create a rental object. Okay, perfect. We do have the ability to get a singular rental. So I could say API slash rentals slash integer ID slash. This should allow for a GET request, which should return a singular object representing a rental. We should have the ability to send a delete request, which should return a string stating rental has been deleted. We should also allow for a put request or a put method, which should return a rental object. Now we also have the ability within the put request, and let me see here. So update details of a specific rental by its ID. Okay, so maybe a rental could be reassigned. Let's do it where optional, we could receive a client of integer, and optionally, we could receive a book of type integer. All right, so that's what those question marks are supposed to represent. Hey, this is optional, what we're seeing here. All right, so there's the breakdown of my URL patterns, HTTP request, and everything that I could possibly get, or the way that I want to structure my URL endpoints and views to work. Does anyone have any questions over how we created this nice little breakdown of our URL and HTTP requests from the instructions? All right, if no one has any questions regarding that, does anyone have any questions over my decisions as to how I went and structured my database schema? Awesome. It doesn't seem like we have any questions. So now we can go ahead and dive into the actual process of building our API. Well, first things first, I want to create a Python virtual environment because I want everything to exist within this virtual environment. So I'll say Python -m vmv.venv. You can see that it's loading. I then say source virtual environment activate. That activates my virtual environment. I can pip install --upgrade pip. And that's going to upgrade my pip as much as possible. I can pip install Django because I know I'm going to need Django. Pip install Django REST framework. And finally, I can pip install psychopg binary, which gives me the ability to speak to PostgreSQL. All right. So now I have my entire virtual environment ready to go and all of my installments ready. I can pip freeze to see what's inside of this list. Excuse me, I see Django, Django REST Framework, and psychopg binary. When it comes to databases, I can create DB, and I'm just going to call this library DB. Looks like I already have this from a previous exercise, so I'm just going to drop it and create it. All right. And in a separate terminal, I'm going to go ahead and enter it. I see a hand up. Go ahead, Tom.
Real quick, what was the pip command for the update?
It's pip install --upgrade pip. Let me see if I can load it. I'll drop it in Slack.
Okay.
And it's only if your pip isn't updated. If you update it globally, you should be fine.
All right. There you go. So pip is installed. Everything's up to date. I have all of my dependencies. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, maybe you can would you be able to like add all the CLI CLI commands you use that you think we'll need in Slack or on a form or something?
Do you mean as far as installments? Yeah, sure. Let's do this. Let's do touch notes.md. Let's do touch commands.md. That should work. All right. And for these commands, we had pip install dash upgrade pip. We had pip install Django, pip install Django REST framework, pip install cyclopg binary. And this was all written in Bash. And let's go ahead and add a note there explaining that this handles installing all dependencies. All right, something like that.
Amazing. Thank you.
Of course. All right. Well, now that we
Yeah,
have
just as if you look in the chat, Python, I don't know if it's Python or pip, but you can actually have it create your requirements.txt automatically, just as a comment.
All right, thanks, Rick. Appreciate it. Okay, so there we go. We have all of our dependencies that we need. We have all of everything installed. Like Rick mentioned, if I really wanted to, I could freeze all of my everything inside of requirements.txt by running pip freeze requirements.txt. This is additional, right? In any case, I think it's more important for us to know that when we grab a new project and we want to install all of the dependencies from a new project, we want to do it as such. Let me go ahead and do bash and do if requirements.txt present. Then we want to do pip install -r requirements.txt. Right, to install everything from the requirements. All right, and let me go ahead and do this. Install dependencies from requirements.txt. All right, easy peasy. Let's take a look at commands. All right, everything looks nice and pretty. Okay, so now I have all of my commands annotated. I can go ahead and start working through the process of creating my project. All of this will already be done for you, but I will add it into the commands just so that we remember it. So I'll go ahead and write in bash. Here we can do something like Python, or excuse me, this will be Django admin start project. And I'm just going to call this library project. This will start the project. I may just open up a Jupyter notebook and start putting all of this stuff in there. So let's do Django admin start project library project. And I almost forgot the period, so let me go ahead and add that in there because I want it within this directory. So now I have my library project available to me. We can see that manage.py is also available. And now we can go into the process of editing information. So for example, if I want to connect to my database, right, we currently have a project now available. Let's move this down here. And within my project, I have settings.py. Now for settings.py, I want to update my database configuration to match PostgreSQL and the database name. So let's go ahead and do that here shortly. I'm going to come over to my library project, settings.py. I scroll down. Here's my database configuration. I change this to PostgreSQL. And I update my database name to, what did I name it? I think I've named it LibraryDB. Let me check that terminal. It is LibraryDB. All right, and that will connect my project. Good. Now, before I start doing any sort of migrations or anything like that, let's just make sure that the Python server can actually run. All right, let's run Python, manage py, run server. All right, so it looks like my Python server is up and running. We can see that my Django application was created successfully. So this is good for me to know. Awesome. Where were we? There we are. So now I can go and actually start creating some apps and start developing my project. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel the server. Here I'm going to go ahead and run Python, manage py, start app, followed by the name of my application, which in this case, we have the client app. We have the book app. And we have the rental app. And let me add that to our commands here. All right. So then we have all three of our apps. Django is not aware of it as of now. Inside of our settings, we actually need to go into installed apps. And we need to add a string representing the names of all created apps and or apps utilized by the project. All right. And this is my implementation of that flow that was requested during Retro. Is this kind of accomplishing that goal, or would we like to see something a little bit more specific?
I don't know. It's good. I like it. The only issue is we may run late on time, but we'll see.
All right. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, we don't necessarily need to do it right this moment, but I think also having like a roadmap of sorts would be nice, such as like, you know, just with what you've done so far, one, planning, data models, identify relationships. Uh, two, create virtual environment and install dependencies,
Got it.
etc. So that way we can be like, okay, cool, I did all of that, check. Now I can move on to like the next logical thing.
Okay. Awesome. I may have to get back to you all on that one, since just like Rick mentioned, we are
Right.
squeezed on time. But let me go ahead and keep moving forward here. So now we have all of our apps installed. Well, what's next? Or let's see. Here we're going to add our string. Let's come over to our settings.py. And in our settings.py under installed apps, I want to go ahead and add the following. I have my client app. I have my book app. And I have my rental app. So those are all the apps that I've created, but apps that are being utilized, there's REST Framework. And there is REST Framework .auth token that will be using. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you a heads up. You misspelled rental when you made the rental app. I don't know if that's going to cause problems with your import.
It is going to cause problems. Thank you so much. So let me go ahead and fix that really quick. I'm going to go ahead and rm-rf this Riantol and run Python. Of course, I can't spell Python now. Manage py, start app, rental, app. And now we're getting an issue. What is the issue? Let's see here. Oh, just trying to find rental app when it doesn't exist. Boom, boom, and boom. There you go. Okay, so now my rental app has been created. Everything's up to speed. Now, I still haven't made any migrations, and I'm not going to as of yet, because before doing so, I want to actually change what my user is going to look like. I'm not going to utilize the built-in user from Django. Instead, I'm going to add an auth user model field with a string representing the location to the user model, which in this case, it's our client. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to the bottom, add an auth user model, which will be equal to client app dot client. All right. Well, the client app doesn't actually, or client app models doesn't actually have this client just yet. So let's dive into that. Get back over here. All right. So here I have my client app, and within my client app, I have models.py. Within models.py, I'm going to create a client that inherits from the abstract user. And that should be pretty much it. That's everything that I'm going to do inside of this file. So I'm going to go ahead and come over to my client app, open up my models. I'm going to say from Django.contrib .auth .models. I want to import the abstract user model. All right, and I'm getting a little bit of issue as far as import statements go from Python. That's because it's not tracking on the correct environment. So I'm just going to run which Python 3 that will map my virtual environment, and I'm going to add it. This has really
And the
nothing to do
interpreter.
with sorry, Rick, you messed up my train of thought. I don't know what I was saying anymore.
Sorry.
All right. Well, now we have Python working. I have my abstract user model, and now I can go ahead and create my client. So I say class of client. This is going to be the abstract user, where I'm going to have my email field be of models.email. I need to make sure that this is unique equals true, because I'm going to use that as my username field. And then I'm going to empty out my required fields. That way everything can be as simple as possible. All right, so there's my client app. It has been created. Before I start worrying about any other models or authorization or anything like that, I can go ahead and start making my migrations. So I'm going to come back over to my commands here. and add this command. I'm going to run Python manage.py, make migrations, and then Python manage.py migrate. And these commands will insert models from Django into the database as data tables. Right. So now I can go ahead and execute Python manage py, make migrations. Okay, we can see that a migration was made for the client model. Python manage py, migrate. Everything migrates into pSQL. We can see that there's quite a bit of migrations that actually happened. Something important for me to annotate is that my auth token was also migrated in there. And this auth token is coming from the REST framework auth token app. All right, if I take a look at my relationships now, I can see that all of those models are now data tables inside of my Django application. All right, I've been going on for quite a while. I have been answering questions on the hip, but I do want to also pause and give everybody the opportunity to kind of digest everything as to where we're at and open it up for questions if anybody has any questions. Go ahead, Tom.
So this will probably not be a part of our assessment, but just for future knowledge, if this were connected to a front end, um, when should we just establish that file structure so that way we're not moving files later and breaking things for organization's sake, like, putting everything into like back end and front end? Um, when should we create that front end structure?
Um, so the way that I like to think about it, it should always work in a hamburger method, where essentially you start by planning. So your planning process should start from the front end. What is it that you want your application to look, all right? From there, you should be able to identify what components you have. By identifying what components you have, you can recognize what data is it that you need to be able to render that component, all right? From recognizing what data you need, you can build what your JSON response should look like. And by building what your response should look like from your Django framework, from your API, then you can build what your model should look like. All right. So the planning process, as far as drawing everything out on TLDraw, starts from front end down to the back end. And then the coding process goes from back end to the front end. So you build out your API first, make sure that everything within your API is working, and then you build a front end to interact with your API. Does that answer your question, Tom?
Yeah, I think so. I was more, I mean, that went more in depth and gave me much more oversight. But I was also just talking about like on your left hand side for like your file structure. Because I know like for our very last school assignment where we had to utilize a front end to communicate with the back end, we didn't have a front end set up, anything like that. And when I tried to move things around for like file organization, it just like broke everything. So I had to forego organization altogether and just have like all my front end files living here and then all the back end files just living here. And just it looked like a mess, but I mean, it functioned. I was just trying to go for like, planning ahead for organization's sake.
Got it. Okay, I think I could cover that. I would have to demo it, and I could definitely do it once we're done with the original portion of the demo.
For sure.
Awesome. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, I'm already keyed. All right. One question I'll make real quick. Um, So you used a custom user instead of using the built-in user. I don't know if that's testable, like if y'all are expecting us to do that, or if we're allowed to just use the built-in user. And the question to go on top of that, what is the best practice? Is it to create a custom user instead of using the built-in user?
So when it comes to best practice, that would be a it depends kind of answer. If the custom user that already comes with Django meets all of the requirements for your application, then why? Right? There's no point of making your own user if it already
Yeah, I
comes with
got you.
everything included.
All right, cool.
As far as the assessment goes, we will ask you guys to make a user yourselves.
Okay.
Uh,
And just a quick on Tom's point, if you watch YouTubes of people that create their own projects, how they normally do it is they'll make a folder called front end and a folder called back end, and they'll put their Django project inside of the back end, or you could call it client and back end, however you want to do it. But that's how I've seen a lot of people do it is they'll separate it into individual folders. So, all right, that's all.
nice. Alex?
Uh, Rick asked a lot of my questions. The only thing is, when it comes to, I guess, if we're working on the personal project, where would we find? I think you did go over it a while back. How do we know the fields that the Django built-in user comes with?
Oh, got it. Sorry, it took me a while to unwrap that question. So if you come over to the abstract user model, you can look it up in the Django application, or excuse me, the Django documentation. It'll break down the abstract user model for you. Or you could come over and code if you hold down control if you're on a in a WSL machine, or if you hold down command if you're on Mac, and then click on the abstract user, it's going to take you to that model. And then this
Oh, okay.
model shows you all of the fields that are already within it.
So abstract user is the built-in Django user.
That's right. Yes.
Got it. Understood. Okay, cool.
All right. Perfect. Now that we have this application up and running, we were able to make some migrations. We have one of our models created. Let's go ahead and create the rest of our models. All right. We have our client app. I want it to also have a book app where it's going. Oh, not you. Come on. Where we're going to have a book, or excuse me, in models.py. Oh, I did want it to be that. I don't know why I tried changing it. Where we're going to create a book with the appropriate fields. So let's come over to that book model. Let me close all this up now because now we have too much noise on the screen. There you go. All right, so we come over to the book app, open up the models, and here I'm going to make my class of book, which takes in models.model. I'm going to go ahead and open up that SQL draw that I had and just click on this book so I could see it. I don't have to worry about the ID. I do have to worry about the title, which is going to be models.charfield. I do have to worry about the author, which again, it's going to be a char field. And I think all of them are character fields with the exception of publish date. So I should be able to step on the gas in creating this information then. So say ISBN, models, field, boom. We have our genre, which is models.charfield. And then we have our publish date, which is kind of a loser. And that's going to be our date field. All right, I'm not going to provide default values for any of them since these are going to be coming straight from my JSON data. They are something that I want to have available. So I'm going to leave it as such. None of them should be able to be created without their appropriate values. I'm going to come back here to my map, and in my book app, not book app anymore. Now I want to go to my rental app, and I want to update a rental. Where a rental model will have a foreign key, which is many to one, relationship to book, and have a foreign key. I'm just going to go ahead and do this number. Relationship to client. All right, so I come over to my models inside of my client app, or excuse me, my rental app. I'll open up my models. I make my model, or excuse me, my class of rental, which takes in from models.model. Here I have my client, and I also have to import from my client app.models. I'm going to import client, and from the book app.book, excuse me, .models, I want to import book. So this is going to be a models.foreign key. And that will be to establish to client. I'm going to have a on delete method of models.cascade. And I'm going to have a related name of rentals. That way all rentals are visible. Okay, same thing with books. Should be a models.foreign key attached to the book. Which will have an on delete field of models.cascade, where my related name is of rentals. All right. So there's my many-to-many table, or my connecting table between my client and my books. All of them are within their own apps, and I should be able to migrate them both. So now I can run Python, manage PY, make migrations, and then Python, manage PY, migrate. And everything is up to date within my database. All right, go ahead, Tom.
Why are both of the related names rentals?
Because from my book application, or excuse me, from my book model, if I click dot rentals, I'll be able to see all of the rentals that have my book included in it, the current book that I've selected. If I'm within the client, I want to see all of the rentals that belong to that one client. So I would say something like client.rentals or request.user.rentals, and that would give me this list of objects. If it was the other way around, and let's say my book was strictly dictated to my client, then I would have them backwards, where my book would have client and related name, and my client would have books and related name. But because this is a many-to-many relationship or a connecting table, I'm referencing them both as rentals. Does that answer your question, Tom?
I think so. So does that mean we have a related name in uh, books as well? That's just um, books.
Yeah, so essentially now, let me open it up here. So this is my rental. What models am I in? All right, so I'm inside of my rental models, right? If I go to my book app and open up the models, now I added a field named rentals that would return all rental objects. Where the book ID is equal to book.id. And the same would apply to the client. So now from the client model, we would now have a field called rentals, which would grab from the rentals where the client ID is equal to client.id. Does that help clarify things? Okay, I see head nods. Awesome. Arnold?
Yeah, so just to reiterate that, so in your rental app, so your related name rentals, you're referencing the variables that you just put in for rental is equal to rentals.objects, correct? The actual variable name of that.
Yes, that's it. So now if I come over to my client and I come over to models,
Okay.
that's the variable name that I can reference it as.
Is there a reason why you're commenting that out now? For now?
Because this isn't actually a field. This isn't some executed code that I'm gonna have within myself on my editor. Django is gonna create this relationship for me when the code compiles. So I
Okay.
don't actually write it manually.
S- so does that mean it would just appear in your class as a field, like at the end?
It's never going to appear within your data table if that's what you're asking, but it is
Yeah.
going to appear within the class inside of your Python code.
Okay. I'm a little confused on that part. So how does Django know to reference that?
Yeah, so it comes to a little bit of separation of responsibilities here, right? So Django and PostgreSQL are two separate engines. And Django is always interpreting Pythonic code. And same thing with PostgreSQL, where PostgreSQL is always interpreting SQL queries, right? They can speak to one another, and anything coming from models.model or from the models module, right? And that's what we're inheriting up above, right? From Django.db.models. Anything coming from that relationship or from that module will turn into or turn Python code into SQL queries. All right. So currently, if I take a look at my client app, or excuse me, where's my rental app? My rental app, this foreign key relationship, that gets turned into a SQL query. This foreign key relationship gets turned into a SQL query. All right. But everything else, this on delete and related name, that's purely Pythonic code. So those relationships or those actions are managed through Django, only through its Pythonic code. So things like related name, PostgreSQL is not aware of any related name portion here. That only exists within Django. And this on delete, also PostgreSQL is not aware of it. It's purely managed through Django's Pythonic code, right? So it's kind of a separation of responsibilities there. Does that kind of clarify things?
Yes, just to reiterate, so basically the related name is just something that you establish beforehand, but the main thing is the model stat foreign key, and then you put in the class that you're trying to reference to.
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
All right. Awesome. So now we have our model. Everything is in there. We covered a little bit of separation of responsibilities. And it is currently, I believe, 15:05. So let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break and then come back and continue our review, everyone. I'll see everybody back at 15:15. Okay, fantastic. So currently we have our book rentals, all of our models are ready to go, and everything's within my data table. Now the next thing to slap down is going to be our serializers. So let's go ahead and start working with our serializers from my model view. All right, so currently for my model, and there's a couple of different ways to tackle this. So the way I'm going to decide to create my serializer is where I'm also going to have a create method for my serializer. You do not need to do this. You could do it all just the way we taught it in the curriculum, but this will isolate all of my behavior. So I'm going to come over to my terminal here. I'm going to create a serializers file within my client app. And inside of my client app, I have a serializer. So let me go ahead and close this up a little bit. All right, doesn't look like it's going to let me close it up any more than what we have there. So within serializers.py, I'm going to have a serializer or a client serializer that will inherit from model serializer from Django REST framework. And I'm going to update the create method. All right. Now, when I update this create method, I should probably also ensure that password is only for write only. And we'll go into that portion here as well. All right, so here I'm going to create my class, or excuse me, let me go ahead and import first. So I'm inside of my client app serializers. I'm going to clean this up a little bit. I'm going to say from REST framework dot serializers. I want to import model serializer. Then I'm going to go from models. I would like to import my model itself of client. Great. I can go into my class of model, or excuse me, client serializer, where I'm going to inherit from the model serializer. Here I can make my class meta, specifying my model is of client. I can make my fields be equal to all. And I want to update the create method. All right. So we can see that I've received validated data for the create method. The create method is triggered whenever I utilize .save. So what I'm going to do here is I will have my client be equal to client.objects.create user. And in this create user portion, I'm actually going to have my client, or excuse me, my data. All right, that's going to save my user. Well, I also want to create a token for this user. So I can say from REST framework dot auth token dot models. I want to import token. And I'm just going to switch this up to user here. I'll say my token is equal to token dot objects dot create, where the user is equal to the user from up above. And finally, all I'm going to return will be the user that I created. All right. This is the first time we've seen this. This is an inheritance portion from model serializer. I'm overriding how we're going to be writing into the database. I'm utilizing the create user This isn't default behavior so for model serializers, and that's why I'm referencing the client itself. The validated data that happens after we do is valid. So once the data has been validated, I can pass it into my create user object to create a user and then create a token. I actually don't even have to save the token. I could just create the token and then return the user. Does anyone have any questions about this? Okay. Well, we might actually need a way to read a token now. So I need to have a token available to me. For this token, what I'm going to use is a method serializer or a serializer method field. And I can make a method called get token that takes in self and the object. Now the token class seems to make a related name field of auth token. So I could just copy that. And here I want to return object dot auth token dot key. Right, so this is going to grab the auth token that's matched to the user. So I'll just, instead of saying object, I'll say user. Well, even better, I'll name it as client. We're going to grab the auth token that matches this client and then return the key. And this serializer method field will only work. Whoa, hey, what is this? I apologize. Will only work in read only. So I'll make sure that this is read only equals true. All right. Now there is a process for hiding the password. This serializer has already gotten pretty complicated, so I'm not going to go into how to hide the password just yet. I'll leave that for additional content towards the end. That way it doesn't become too confusing. But at this point, does anyone have any questions over how we're utilizing the serializer method field to be able to grab our token and how we're actually creating a user? Go ahead, Tom.
So I thought we were using the built-in user. So maybe I'm just getting backwards here. So why did we create a create serializer?
So this serializer itself is a serializer that should help us with all CRUD capabilities. This capability here is specifically the create out of all of them. The reason why I'm overriding it is because when it runs client.objects.create automatically, it's going to pass in all the validated data. But just the create method without this underscore user doesn't put our password into the database hashed. It doesn't actually hash the password. So in order to ensure that it hashes the password, I'm going to override it and make sure that it utilizes the create user method to write into the database. Does that answer your question, Tom?
Yeah, so the auth user, the built-in one, it does not store the passwords hashed in the database. It's just plain text.
The user itself does, whenever you save it into the database, only if you're utilizing this create user method, right? That's what we're calling the user itself. The reason why we're overriding is because the serializer doesn't have this create user method. The issue isn't the user model, it's the serializer that's coming in from DRF.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. So there's our client serializer. Um, Instead of doing a serializer for every single app, let's actually get our client running first, right, with all of the URLs and everything planned into it. So now that my serializers are working, I can actually create my views. And let me move all of this down some more. Oh, All right. So now within views.py, I'm going to actually create a sign up view that's going to inherit from API view, from DRF, and return a response from response. Excuse me, with response from DRF. Okay, not only am I going to have a sign up view, but this sign up view should leverage the client serializer or CRUD. I am going to have a login view that conducts the same exact capabilities. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that and turn this into login. I am going to have an info view that inherits from an API view, returns a response, and leverages the client, but also has authentication classes of token authentication and what's the other one? Interesting. And permissions classes. I think that's what it's called. Of is authenticated. All right. So quite a bit of a view there for info. That info view is also going to have the same thing for my logout view. And we're going to need more space. But in this case, instead of leveraging my serializer, I'm just going to delete the token and return a response. All right. Let's go through this process here. I'm going to open up my file, go into my views. Here I'm going to say from dot serializers. I want to import. I shouldn't need my client, so I'm just going to grab my client serializer from REST framework dot API, or excuse me, dot views. I'm going to need an API view from REST framework dot response. I'm going to need response from REST framework dot status. I am going to need, actually, I'm just going to import status as S. Shouldn't need anything else from there. I already have my client serializer, so that's good. That should handle all of my token and everything rendering. So let's start working through this. I'm going to make my class of signup, where my class of signup is going to inherit from API view. It's then going to grab the request data. So I'll say data is equal to request dot data dot copy. I'm going to manipulate the request a little bit. And actually, I should probably make a method. That might be a good idea. For posts, which takes in self and request. There you go. Having a quick brain fart, I apologize. All right, so I take my post request. I grab all of my data. From there, I'm going to manipulate the data to have a username field, which is going to be set to data.get email. So the email will be in there twice, once under the emailed key and once under the username key. Finally, I can go into the process of utilizing my serializer. So new user could be equal to client serializer, where my client serializer will take in data equal to data. I'll say if new user dot is valid. Then I want new user dot save. And I want to return a response showing new user dot data with the status code of S HTTP 201 created, because we're going to create a user. All right, this is assuming that everything works. If it does not work, I would like to return a response with new user dot errors with a status code of HTTP 400, telling them they sent me a bad request. All right, so there's my sign-up view. Before I go into creating the rest of my views, I'm going to actually interact with urls.py. Oh, okay. There you go. And in urls.py, inside of URL patterns, I'm going to add a path that matches RESTful API naming conventions. And scoot this over so we can view this correctly. Running out of real estate here. I apologize, everyone. Attach to the desired API class-based view as a view. Okay. And then for testing, we want to make sure we add a name. All right, we're probably not going to go into the testing portion, but just so you know, if you're testing your API endpoints, you probably want to add a name into them. All right, so let's go into that. We're going to go touch. Here's my client app, urls.py. I open up that urls.py. I'll say from django.urls, I want to import path and open up URL patterns where I have my path of signup, which ties to my views. So I'll say from.views, import signup. We have our signup.as view. And then we could add a name parameter where we could do signup. All right. Now this isn't tied to my projects just yet, because my projects themselves also have some API views. Definitely running out of real estate. And here, my paths should include the location of follow-on URL files within apps. All right, so we come over to our project, urls.py. I add my path stating API / users / and this should include the location of client app.urls. All right, let's test it out and then open it up for questions. So I'll say Python manage py, run server. Okay, so the server was actually able to run, so that's a good sign there. I'm gonna be very surprised if I'm able to get this in the first try. Okay. Let me go ahead and copy this URL pattern here. We know that it's supposed to go to API/users/signup. We said we wanted this to be a post request. We don't want any authorization headers, so headers are good for authorization. And we do want a body where we want something like email. Let's do fr@fr.com. And we do want a password at fr. All right, so there's my post request. I go ahead and send the request. And there is my user that has now been generated. All right. Again, we're seeing the password, which is not ideal. This should be removed from my GET request. But I do have my token also available. So that's good as far as being able to see the data. So now I have everything available to me that I need to be able to actually work with this API. And a user can sign up for my application. So let me do a quick review over what we did. Starting off with our serializer, we created our serializer for our client, where we have a serializer method field for our token, which is a serialized, again, a serialized method field. It utilizes this get token method, which just returns the key of that client for that token. We grab all of the fields, and we can see that our create method is actually creating a new client with the user because that is hashed, and a token is also being created because when we did our get request to be able to grab that token, it returned a value. All right, within my views, it really simplified everything. I had to do a little bit of data manipulation to be able to get that email field inside of that username. From there, I pass it into my serializer, validate my data, save the data, and then return either the data object or the errors with the appropriate status response. All right. Does anyone have any questions over how we signed up a user? Go for it, Sam.
Yeah, I walked out when you were first doing it, so I might have missed it. Why are you setting the username to equal the email?
Username equal to email. That is because whenever you're creating a user in Django, it's always going to expect there to be a username field, just like it expects there to be a password field. All right. Even though nowhere in my models, oh, this is the wrong models. Even though nowhere inside of that model, where are you at? Client app model. There you go. Nowhere am I stating that there should be a username field. I'm also not stating that there should be a password field. So Django is always going to be looking for both of those, username and password, whenever we're creating or interacting with users. So I need to ensure that there's a username field that has the same value as the email. Does that answer your question, Sam?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Of course. Arnold?
Yeah, could you in your views.py, can you scroll up, please?
Sorry, one more time.
Can you scroll up to your views.py, please?
Scroll up. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
of course. Any other questions? All right, doesn't seem like there are any other questions. So let's leverage this momentum that we have going on now. And let's move to our sign-in view. Let's do a class of login, which again is going to grab from an API view. It's going to take in a post request, which will take in self and request. We expect the request to have the data. So I'm almost going to grab the same exact code here to match it. Nice. We can then grab the user. So user is equal to authenticate. And I apologize, we need to grab authenticate. This will come from django.contrib.auth. I want to import authenticate. All right, we're then going to authenticate our user with the appropriate parameters. So it doesn't seem like it needs the request, but it does need the credentials. where username is equal to data.get username. And then we have password, which is going to be equal to data.get password. Let me format that a little bit so it's a little bit cleaner. This will either return a user object or a client object or none. So I can say if user, then I would like to return a response where I have my user available to me. And this is going to be interesting because a token also needs to be added. So I'm going to do token dot objects, and it looks like we need to import tokens. So let's do that. Token dot objects dot, and this is going to be get or create, where we're going to say that the user is equal to user. And we don't have to worry about any of holding on to this value or what this will return because that's already going to be handled by my serializer. So now I can just call my client serializer, pass in the user, and return the data attribute. Else, I want to return a response stating no user matching credentials and with a status of HTTP 404 not found. All right. So again, we grab our user. We're then going to authenticate the user with a matching username and password. If there is a user, we're either going to get or create, right? And the chance that there isn't a token available because we're deleting tokens, we're just going to create it and then return it to the user. All right. And we don't just want to utilize the create method because if there is a token already existing and we try to delete it, it's just going to raise an error saying, hey, there's a token already assigned to this user. So now we can go ahead and test it. Actually, before we can go ahead and test it, I probably want to add it to my URL patterns. All right, where I want to make sure I have login. Let's do my path of login, which will take the login as view and a name of login. Now we can go ahead and test it. I'm going to come over to Postman. I'm still going to use the same email and password. I'm just simply going to replace sign up with login. And I should receive the same exact response with a different status code of 200. I send my request, same exact response comes through within status code of 200. So there's the login method. All right. Let's do a quick review over how the login method is working. Again, we do some data manipulation to grab that email into the username field. We utilize the authenticate function to match the password and the username. We need to utilize authenticate because our password is hash. So in order for Django to be able to match it with the correct credentials, we utilize this authenticate function. This returns either an instance of the user or none. If I receive an instance of my user, I am then going to make sure that there is a token that was generated for it, and then return this serialized value of data for that one user. If this fails to match a user, we're just simply going to return there's no user matching these credentials with the status of HTTP 404 not found. Does anyone have any questions about how we log in a user? Let's hear it, Rick.
I had one question. I can probably look it up, but I noticed that when we were going through all the lessons, even when we were contacting or maybe I just missed it when we were contacting APIs like outside, not just local APIs to not Postgres, Django. Um, and maybe I just don't understand how Axios works, but we wouldn't use Axios for any of this kind of stuff for like getting users from the database and stuff like that.
I'm a little confused in regards to your question. If you're asking
All
about
right. Well,
things,
I think I'm confusing myself too. So, yeah, I think. All right. I'll look it up. I think I'm just confused.
okay, awesome. I apologize, but Axios shouldn't have to interact with this process up to this point unless you're working with a full stack application.
Okay. All right.
Go ahead, Cricket.
What was the include stand for? You put the main URL, you put the path for the API URL in the main project, inside
Yes.
the main project.
So this include is a function. So if I go to the URLs in the main project, where are you? There we are. This include maps it to the URL file that we have inside of my client app. So I'm going to say, hey, with the endpoint of API v1 users, I want you to then continue reading the URLs that are present inside of the client app. So it opens up the client app and looks for sign up or login.
Okay. So let's say if you create another API with a serializer with the another app, you gotta put it in, and then include and then link with the let's say book what's it called. Right now we creating a client URL. If you create another like what's the one the
URL patterns.
yeah you still gotta like add it to the
That,
link to the main project to
that's right.
test it. Okay.
Yes, that's correct. All right. Okay, awesome. So let's go ahead and continue pushing forward here. Now we're able to log in a user, we're able to log out a user. Let's actually grab some info from this user and utilize that token. So I'm going to close some of this information down, come over to my views. And here I'm going to add a little bit of authentication information as well. So let's grab this info view, which is going to take in an API view. Here we're going to have our authentication classes, and we are going to have our permission classes. Both of these need to come in from REST framework. So I'll say from REST framework dot authentication. I want to import token authentication. From REST framework dot permissions, I want to import is authenticated. All right, so now I can add them both. I can add token authentication, and I can add is authenticated. Now within my settings, I also need to add a specific line of code. This will be my REST framework authentication method. That needs to be set to token authentication. Right? So let's go ahead and do that here. And I believe that actually came in our notes as well. So let me close down what I can. Maybe minimize this here. So here's my README. This is what I'm looking for. My REST framework default authentication classes. I'm going to copy that and add it to my settings.py. It really doesn't matter where you add it. This ends up turning into a dictionary, so it's always going to have direct access. But I like to add it right above templates. And there you go. Okay, so I have my authentication classes set up. Within my views, I can now continue. And I can say that I am going to receive a GET request. And within this request, I'll have a user, which is equal to request.user. And I can just simply return a response where I have my client serializer taking the user And I don't have to clarify anything regarding status. All right, everything in my server is up and running, but I haven't tied it into my URLs. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's do path. This is going to take in my info as view. Let's do the name of info. Okay, everything there is working. Everything in settings is good to go. And my views are good to go. So now when we go into testing it, I'm going to grab my token, copy it. I'll then send a GET request to users. And I want to send this request with the header of authorization. So there's my authorization header. I'm going to add this token with the word of token, prepending it, prepending the value, and then send my request. It looks like I got an error here. So let's see what's going on within Django. So you passed a serializer instance as data. Oh, easy peasy. I forgot to add .data. All right, I send my request, and there I have my user information. All right, Tom, let's hear it.
Does lowercase token versus title case token matter?
Lowercase token. Where are we talking about here?
Yeah, because like if you look at the JSON data, token there is all lower, but there you have it in title. So does that make a difference, or does it convert it all to lower anyway?
So it's definitely going to make a difference. If I send this in lowercase and I try to send my request, it's going to, oh, look at that. Interesting. I wonder if it utilizes .title to match it. Now you got me. I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole. So to answer your question, it looks like it does not matter. You could have it either in lowercase or uppercase and sending the request, and it will be able to match it. We'll talk about how it's breaking this down tomorrow when we start talking, or excuse me, on Monday when we start talking about token authentication on the full stack application once deployed. Does
Sounds
that answer
good.
your question, Tom?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, Rick.
Yeah, just want to say I'm an idiot. Axios is JavaScript, not Python. So yeah, I answer my own question.
All right, awesome. Let's go ahead and keep moving forward here. So there we go. We have all of our users being able to log in. Let's just add the ability to log out or delete our token now. All right, we could also have this user permissions, which I'm actually going to enforce, which will inherit from API view. This is not a required statement, so you could definitely avoid doing this if you would like to. And inherit from it. This way, I'm not rewriting my authentication classes over and over again, since I want all of my views to have those authentication classes be required. All right, so now I have my class of sign out or log out, which takes in user permissions. It's only going to accept a post request, which will take in self and request. And here we're just going to delete the token. So I can say request dot user dot auth token. This auth token is coming from that related name field. I could open up this token value and we can see that related name is auth token. So this will give me the instance of token being returned. All right. And I can delete it. Dot delete. And then finally, I could return a response stating an F string saying user, excuse me, request.user.username has been logged All right, coming back over to my, oh, haven't added it to my URL, so let's go ahead and add that in there. Let's do logout. We have our path of logout, which takes in logout as view, and a name of logout. Great. I can come over to my Django API, or excuse me, to Postman. I still have my authorization header. I'm going to send it to logout. I send my request. I get fr at fr.com has been logged out. If I try to send a GET request now to users with the same exact token, I should get an invalid token. So I have to log in my user. I'm going to send this to post. Come back over to login. A new token is provided for me. I'm going to copy that token and replace the one that I have in my authorization headers. Send this request over to GET, and I can get my user information all over again. All right, so now my full authentication is complete. I have the ability to log in, log out, sign up, and get my own info as a user. And that's going to be it for our user implementation. At this point, does anyone have any questions over how we created the sign up, login, info, and logout behavior? All right, if no one has any questions, I'm going to go ahead and pause us here. It is currently 13:58, or excuse me, 15:58. Let's come back at 16:08 to continue on with our lecture. I'll see everybody back in 10. Thank you so much, everyone, and I'll see everyone shortly. All right, perfect. So now my user is able to log in. My entire user capabilities are completed. If I come up above, all of my user or client endpoints, oh, I need to change that to clients. Okay, that's an easy fix. Let me come over to my project URLs. Not you. Still not you. Here you go. To my project URLs and update that from users to clients. All right, so all of my client's capabilities are up and running at the appropriate API endpoints. I can now move on into my books, being able to read all of my books. And this is probably going to be the easiest one to accomplish. So let's go into that. Here is my book app. I have my models. I definitely want to create a serializer for this information. So I'm going to create that file. So I'm going to say touch book app serializers .py. Now, just like before, within the serializers file, I'm going to say from REST framework .models, or excuse me, .serializers. I want to import model serializer. I want to also from .models. I want to import my book. This one's just going to be a class of book serializer that will inherit from the model serializer. Have a class meta that will be tied to the model of book. And then have a fields attribute, which will be set to all. Okay, great. So now I have my models. I can dive into my URL patterns. So touch book app urls.py. In this urls.py, I want to, from Django.urls, I want to import the path. Here I have my URL patterns, where I'm going to include my path. This is going to be for all books, grabbing all books at once as a view with a name of all books. I am then going to also create a path where I am expecting an integer ID. where I am simply going to return a book. All right. These views don't exist yet, so I do have to create them. I want to import all books and a book. Now, all of these, I also want them to only be visible to users. I could have it to where it's visible to everyone. I guess it really doesn't matter in this case. So I have it visible by anyone, whether they have authentication or not. Actually, no, I'm gonna lock them down. Let me close everything up here so that I don't have too many files opened up. Gonna come back over to my views. Here and go from my client app dot views. I want to import user permissions, and that's going to take care of API view and token. So authentication classes and token authentication. So all of that will be taken care of there. I'll say from REST framework dot response. I want to import response. I don't have to worry about status codes because the only status codes that I will have will be of 200. From Django shortcuts, I am going to grab this get object or 404. And finally, from dot serializers, I can import my book serializer. I can say class of all books should be of user permissions, where my get method should just return all of the books. So it looks like we will need books as well. So this is going to be a response. Let's break it up a little bit. Let's say books is equal to book dot objects dot all. And I want to return a response of my book serializer, where I'm taking in books with many equals true. All right. That was a lot of coding. Let's do a quick review over what we've done so far. We went into URLs. We created an all books view, and I'm actually going to comment out the second line so it doesn't cause any issues. So created this all books view. We added it to a path. This view is going to grab all of the books from my database, serialize them, and then return the data attribute from my serializer. As far as my serializer goes, my serializer just taking in the model of book and returning all of the fields. All right. Does anyone have any questions over this URL pattern, view, or serializer? Perfect. If there aren't any questions, let me make sure that my Python server is in fact still running. So my Python server is running. I still have my authentication header. I'm going to run this to clients to make sure that it's still valid. Okay, so it's still valid. And now I want to view books. But in order for me to view books, I need to make sure that it's tied to my project, all right? Because my project isn't tied yet. So now I can come back over, send my request over to path of API slash books slash to include my book app dot URLs. And it seems to be running into an issue here. Let me go ahead and rerun my server one more time. All right, everything's up and running. Everything's included. And as of now, what I expect to get as a response is an empty list. So let me go ahead and come over to books. I send a request and I receive an empty list. Awesome. Now let's say I take off this authorization header and send my request. I should get authentication credentials were not provided. I go back into setting my request, and there's my empty list. Well, now, this empty list, it's not coming in correctly, right? Because I have this books.json. And this books.json isn't necessarily in a fixture format. So I need to update it. Well, this is something that I could utilize ChatGPT for. So I'm just going to bring it right over. And I'm going to state, please update the following JSON data to a Django ORM fixture format for a model living or a model named book within an app named book app. And then I can specify the JSON data and copy it, paste it, send the request. Okay, so now it's telling me here's your JSON data model where a PK was also included. There you go. So this looks valid to me. I'm going to go ahead and copy it, paste it over the data that was given to me. And so now I have a nice book app that's working here. I can Control C to kill my server. I'm going to make a directory within my book app named fixtures. And I'm going to move book.json into my book app fixtures. All right, well, this will allow me to load some data. And this is going to take me back to my commands for loading data. I can use Python, manage.py, load data, and then the path to the fixture. So name of app slash fixtures slash file.json. And loads fixture data onto database. All right, so now we can use it. We run Python manage.py, load data, and specify this is going to be from the book app within fixtures, named books.json. And there I've installed 9 objects from that one fixture. When I run my server again and send my request, I now expect to get a list of 9 objects. And there I get a list of 9 separate objects, all available to me. And all I have to worry about is making sure that there is a get method. All right. Does anyone have any questions over this get all books? Go for it, Tom.
Yeah, when you had GPT convert the JSON, why did it add the model name?
So fixtures actually require you to have a model name field. So when fixtures are being created, they always require this model, a PK, and fields. Right? Currently, the original data structure that I had was just a list of fields, but it didn't have PK or the model. So I specifically told it in the instructions inside of my prompt. I said, hey, know that this is for Django ORM, so it knows how to follow a specific format that Django ORM is looking for. I told it the name of the model, and then I told it the location as to where the model lives. And that's what allows it to turn the fixture into a model where we have bookapp.book, and then the PK just added it incrementally. Does that answer your question, Tom?
Yeah, got it. Just on some of the previous fixtures that we were given, I didn't see model listed, so that was new to me.
Interesting. There should definitely be a model attribute there, so
Hmm.
I'll have to take a look at it and make sure that it's not broken.
Okay.
All right, Cricket.
So that is kind of like a dummy data that you created, and then where are the connection when you try to get the data? How you connect with the JSON file?
Yeah, so this is the dummy data that I have connected, right?
Hmm.
And I placed it within this fixture directory. I then loaded the data onto my database. And the connection is that by running this line of code, it loads this entire fixture file into my database. So if I run select all from my book app, I can see that there's all of the books that come in straight from my fixture file. All right, so that's
Okay.
what this line of code did. So this way, when my API view runs and I run books.objects.all, it returns all 9 of these books inside of my table.
Okay.
All right. Perfect. So it doesn't seem like we have any other questions. Let's go ahead and finish this off by creating our A book view. So here's my A book view, which is going to inherit from user permissions. This view should take in a get request, which should take in self and request, and it's also going to take in an ID for that book. I'll then grab my book, which is equal to get objects or 404, where I'm referencing the book itself, where ID is equal to ID. So that will either throw a 404 or return to me my book instance. And now I can return a response stating where I have my book serializer that takes in the book itself with the data attribute. We tie it in to our URLs file. And excuse me, I'm trying to clean up this whole mess here. All right, so I come over to URLs. I'm going to uncomment a couple of blocks of code. Let's make sure Python's up and running. I'm going to come over here. Here I have my books. Let's say I wanted to take a look at book 2. Well, I can run book/2. And there I would get only the second book, right? And only the object not nested within the list. If I go to an object that doesn't exist, let's say I look for the ID of 30, I expect to see a 404, and I see no book matches the given query. All right. Does anyone have any questions regarding this A book class? All right. If no one has any questions, then let's get into the final and more intensive portion of this assignment, which is going to be our rental app. So for our rental, we're going to need 2 things. We're going to go into our rental app, and I'm going to create a urls.py, and I'm going to create a serializers.py. So both of them have been created. Now in this URLs, I'm going to wait for this URL patterns right now. I'm going to come over to my serializer. And in this serializer, I'll say from REST framework, not serializers. I want to import model serializer. I'm going to say from client app, not serializers. I want to import the client serializer. From the book app, dot serializers, I want to import the book serializer. And then from dot models, I want to import the rental itself. Now, why do I need the client or the book serializers? We'll go into that here shortly. Here I'm going to go ahead and say from, or excuse me, start making my actual class. I'll make my class of rental, which is going to inherit from the model serializer. I have my class meta, where my class meta should have a model, which is equal to rental. Should have a fields, which is equal to all. And we're going to leave this serializer here for the moment. We're going to talk about these foreign key relationships here shortly. But as of now, I have the ability to see a rental or even create a rental. So let's type this into our views. We come over to our views. We want to make sure we grab from user permissions. So from client app dot views, I want to import user permissions. From REST framework dot response, I want to import response. From REST framework, I want to import status as S. And then from serializers, I want to import my rental serializer and the rental model itself. Interesting. Did I not name it class rental? Nice. All right. This should be all the imports that I need. Let's dive into this. We have my class of all rentals, and let's concentrate on tackling this class first, where our get method should return all rentals. And we don't have to worry about a body of within the request. Here I have my rentals be equal to request dot user dot rentals, because I only want to view the viewers or the rentals that belong to this one request. And then I could just add dot all. Now, what is this saying? Let's go into our client model one more time. Well, within my client model, I have this rentals object, which filters by client ID. So when I run this line of code here, this should return a list of query sets where the client is equal to the request.user.id. All right, and I saw there was a big emphasis inside of serializers, and I know there was a question regarding those related field methods earlier as well. So I want to make sure that this one line of code makes sense to everybody. Does anyone have any questions as to how this is functioning here? All right. Doesn't seem like we have any questions, so we can continue moving forward here. And grabbing all of the rentals belonging to that one user, I can then return a response stating that I'm using my rental serializer, where I'm passing in the rentals that I've grabbed with many equals true because I'm handling more than one dot data. I'm going to save this to make sure that's good to go. Let me come over to my server. My server is up and running. Currently, when I send this GET request, I expect it to just be an empty list. And actually, I don't have it tied into my URL patterns. That's probably important. I'm going to go ahead and do from Django.urls. I want to import path. We have our URL patterns where we have path. Let me go ahead and grab from .views. I want to import all rentals. Here I'll utilize all rentals .as view with a naming convention of all rentals. All right, now we just tie it into our project URLs. So I'm going to close that app, come over to our project URL patterns. I have a couple of things opened up, so I'm going to close them all down. And I'm going to include a path that goes to API/rentals. this should include my rental app.urls. All right, I'm going to save this, come over here, save it. Here's my all rentals. All right, everything should be good to go. Let me restart my server one more time. And let's check out if this request is successful. All right, this should still work. Great. I'm going to also make sure that all books still works as well. Okay, so all books also still works. And now let's go into rentals. Well, this should return an empty list. Perfect. I am seeing an empty list, right? Because currently I don't have any rentals. Well, let's go into the post method for creating a rental. In here, all I'm going to need is the book ID. So I'm going to go ahead and come over to my API, which is going to take in self and request. For my post method, I'm going to actually grab the body of my requests, which is equal to request.data.copy. And I expect this to have something like book and then an integer value. I am then going to grab data and add a field for client that will be equal to request.user.id. I can now create a new rental through my serializer that takes in the data. I can validate the data. And if it works, I'm going to save said data and return a response stating new rental.data with the status of HTTP 201. All right. Otherwise, I want to return a response of errors with a status of HTTP 400 bad request. All right, so we know the get method works. When I send my post request, I expect to see book. If book is not included, it's going to raise an error. Let's test that out real quick. I'm going to take a look at my body. Currently, there is no book that's in there. If I send a post request, I expect to see that. So book, this field is required. All right, let me go ahead and add that there. Let's do where book is of 1. And then send my request. Well, now it's successful. Well, let's take a look at this. It's returning to me a JSON object that shows me the client and my book. And if I send a GET request to view all rentals, it's going to show me the same thing. I can continue this process of sending, let's say we send 2 now. I send the request, I send 5, and I send the request. And now when I go to take a look at all of my rentals, you can see that I get a list of objects or an array of objects. But this isn't really useful to me, right? All I'm getting is integer values. That doesn't really help me as far as being able to identify or read this data. Well, this is where the nesting of the serializers comes in. So let's fix this to make it more readable for us. I'm going to come over to my serializers within my rental app. And here I'm going to say that client will be referenced to by the client serializer. And I'm going to make sure that this is only utilized when I'm reading. So I'm going to make this read only equals true. Same thing with the book. This should only be referenced to as the book serializer. And this should be read only equals True. Now let's see what happens to my request response. So here's my response with my old serializer, where I didn't have those nested serializers being implemented. And now that they're nested, when I send my GET request, well, now I have a detailed information in regards to my client, and I have detailed information in regards to the book that has been checked out. Same thing with book 2, book 3, and book 5. If I want to send a post request where, let's say I want to add book 6 in here, and I send my request, this still, oh, interesting. So this ended up failing, and let's take a look as to why it failed. Relation rental app rentals, failing row. Go for it, Cricket.
So you update all the data in the models, right? You did only one migration, you think, and tested everything. So every time you change it, you're supposed to migrate, right? And then you can run the test, right?
The
Oh,
only time you should be migrating is if you changed anything within the model.
oh, okay. So not inside the data to like just load it up. No, it should be fine. It's
Yes,
only models.
if you load data, that works great. But if you change anything within the actual file named models.py, if you change anything in here, then you have to make migrations and migrate.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's changes to your database.
All right, and let me try to figure out what is going on here because this should definitely work. Just treating them both of them as null. Let's see, book and client, they're both read-only equals true. So they should work in here. Interesting. We'll have to go into
Uh,
how to multi-purpose this, but to not make this too difficult. What we'll do is we'll have two serializers. I'll have this called a rental read serializer, and then I'll have a rental serializer. Or preferably, we could name it rental crud. Or create, update, and delete serializer, where we can delete both of these. And now when I go into my views, I just have to change that. So I no longer have a rental serializer. I have a rental read serializer, which I'm going to be utilizing here. And I have a rental CUD serializer, which will manage all of my update and deletes. So now I'm going to send my request one more time. My request is true and it comes back. And I apologize. So if that goes through correctly, I wouldn't want to actually return this rental cut. I would want to return my rental read. So I would say rental is equal to the return value of this dot save. And then I can return my response of my rental read serializer with the rental data dot data. That way I'm never breaking that response. Let's do something like 8. When I send this post request, everything comes back. We can see we're renting out book 8. When I send my get request to all rentals, we can see that we get a massive list of objects where we have details about the client and the book. All right. Does anyone have any questions over how we implemented this rentals serializer? Go ahead, Rick.
yeah, just so so you just created another serializer for the CRUD being able to like um, add rentals to the list. Is that what you ended up doing?
That's what I did, yes. I just have one where I have
Okay.
nested serialization and one where I don't.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's. I was just making sure that's what it looked like. So, all right. Yep.
All right, perfect. With that said, we could probably take this all the way home by creating our final class of a rental that will inherit from user permissions. This could return an object. So here we have our get requests, which we have self, request, and ID. Here we can do this rental, which is equal to get objects for 404, which I forgot to import. So we do get object or 404, pass in request dot user dot rentals. And I want this where ID is equal to the ID that's being passed in. All right. Once I have that rental, I can then return a response where I have my rental read serializer, return it rental dot data. All right, for my put request, and let me go ahead and try this out to make sure that it works. These are my different rentals. If I wanted to see my very first rental that I ever had, I would run one, and I totally forgot to add this into my URL patterns. I apologize, everyone. Wrong URLs. Let me clean that up. Boom. There we go. All right, so here we have my path, which would take in an integer ID, take in a rental as a view, and name it a rental. Right, everything's coming through. We're good to go. There's my integer ID, my views. We send this get request and we get back our very first rental between book one and our client. We can then move into our put method, which is request ID. Pass in the same information here. And here we can actually update to rental. So update rental is equal to rental CUD serializer, where we're passing in the rental object, the data, which is going to be within request.data. And we're going to state that this is going to be a partial update or to be able to accept partial updates. Make it equals true. We'll then say if update rental is valid, we want to save. Utilize a little bit of variable reassignment here. And then we can return a response of rental read serializer, where we have the rental dot data. Else, we could return a response of update rental dot errors with a status of HTTP 400 for bad request. All right, let's go ahead and take this out for a spin. Here I have my rental number one. I'm going to change this to a put request. And for rental one, you can see that the book I'm checking out is of ID of one. Well, I want to change it to the book of ID of 8. When I send my request, I am now working with the book of ID of 8 for my very first rental. So I was able to process this information. If I run something like 50 there, it should return something like, hey, this rental doesn't exist. So I get an invalid PK for the book. That book doesn't exist. Great. If I that should be pretty much it. Yeah, there's nothing else we can really pass in here. All right, so I'm able to update my book rental. And then finally, I want to be able to delete a rental. But before we move into, actually, I'm going to finish the CRUD operations because we are running out of time here. And then I'll open it up for questions. And I apologize to everyone that we're so crunched on time there. So I'll receive my delete requests, which will take in the ID. Again, my rental should be the same exact line of code as up above. And then I could just say, hey, well, I want to delete this rental. I can say name or repr, where we have an f string stating request.user.username has returned the book of rental.book.title. And then we could finally return a response where our response simply just returns the representation method. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to execute that delete for my very first rental. Before I execute that, I'm going to run a GET request. That very first rental has book 8. When I run this delete request, it should delete book 8. And here we see fr@fr.com has returned the book 8. And that's our entire CRUD capabilities for our rentals. All right, that was a lot. This is our entire application. We were able to reach an end state there. So just to cover it from the bottom up, get back up here. There you go. Just to cover it from the bottom up, we have all rentals, which we grab through our user body. This dot rentals, so user dot rentals, this is the related name field that we specified within the rentals model. We return the read serializer with many equals true. We utilize the CUD serializer to be able to create, update, or delete. Here we can validate the data and save it. Remember that save method returns the instance itself. So this will return the instance. So we save that instance into that rental variable, and that's why we pass it into the read serializer. We repeat the process with a rental. We have our put request there for being able to update our rental with partial equals true. And then we have our delete operations. All right. At this point, does anyone have any questions over how we were able to complete the rentals CRUD operations for post, get, put, and delete? All right, if no one has any questions, let's go ahead and stop our recording here. Thank you so much, everyone, for your patience, and I hope this was useful to everybody.